Hello everyone, welcome to our circle Anne Salve Women. For this video, I'm going to be talking about, is there reason to suffer without sacrifice? Now, I really want to start with the question, why suffer without reason for sacrifice? And that sounds a little bit snooty on my part, but I really want to always remind you that whenever I share these, it's always in the light. I don't want you to think that I'm picking at people and saying that there's judgment on your behalf and so forth. That you are to judge your own actions. You're accountable for whatever it is that you decide to do. Own it, and if you can own it, then live with it. That's totally fine. But what I'm concerned with is the mentality that you have to suffer every day, and yet there's no growth, there's no movement forward from it all. And it's almost as if you're telling yourself it's because you deserve this punishment of suffering. And if you're in that mindset, I know that there's people in this world, and my heart aches, where there are children who are put in positions. And I tell my students this all the time, I tell my children all the time, all these stories. And it's not to say that it happens all the time, but it does happen where you find yourself in a situation you don't wake up to ask for, and as I say this, no one gets up and says, wow, today I'm going to really look forward to being poor or being hurt and, being damaged and so forth. That's not your aspiration. You don't grow up and say, you know what, my goal is to be the poorest person in this world, or to be the most damaged person in this world and so forth. It's to put that onto yourself. It's putting you in that position of thinking that you are deserving of that most minimal peace or position in life, and no one deserves that. And so in that case, we all have that heart, we all have that mind, that body and spirit that says, this is my aspiration. And there are sacrifices that are required out of that. And everything that I've done, everything that I have shared with you in my articles and so forth, there's so many pieces that I am not cognizant of the moment, because as soon as I anticipate something that's going to be a little bit more challenging than where I'm at today, right at that given moment, I don't want to acknowledge the pain. I don't want to acknowledge the suffering. I don't want to acknowledge anything that would hold me back and go, oh my goodness, don't jump into that river, or don't go into that fire, or don't go into, where there's going to be lightning and thunderstorms and so forth. You tell yourself you're going to go through it. And you're not even thinking about it. It's just what you do, because you know that other side is waiting for you to be victorious about. And so you essentially are walking through, and you may be walking on fire, on coal, whatever it is, and through some storms, hail, sleet, or snow. And you cannot think of for that moment that's where you're at. For anyone who's ever had to push through, you just think to yourself, as Dwayne Johnson would say, your back is against the wall and you're just pushing yourself. There's only one direction. But my biggest concern is people who think being tired should not is something that doesn't have anything to partake with sacrifice. You're tired all the time, right? But you don't acknowledge that. And well, you can vent. And as I tell my husband, I tell my colleagues, I hopefully I'm not being a putz about anything. But at the same time, it's like when you vent out, it doesn't mean that you haven't made the decision to finish. You can be exhausted. And I tell my students this, where you put in sometimes 100%, 80%, give yourself permission to sometimes saying, you wake up and you go, you're just going to get 20% from me today, if not 50 if I push a little bit. But if it's because you gave your 100 the day before, give yourself permission to be human and say, I need that rest. I need that recuperation phase or stage or period in my life where as long as it's not taking too long, or then you just stop, then that is something that you have to innately say, I need that. I need to recharge. But my thought in that process is, where those though that continue to suffer cyclically over and over and over, and then that is what we then push on to our next generation, and saying that suffering is part of our makeup, that's just who we are, and that's where we found ourselves to be, is that we are always going to constantly suffer. And I would beg to differ, because if that was the case, then my papa would look at me and go, you're going to be just like me. And thankfully he just kept himself silent, just like when my husband and I have kept ourselves silent throughout our moments where we're just going through the grind of just doing the best we can to succeed in whatever it is, our aspirations, every goals that we've had, and we're not perfect at it, you know, in raising children. From the time that I was so young and not even knowing everything, but I'd already made up my mind I was going to succeed, and I know my husband has made up his mind that he was going to succeed, and we were going to succeed together no matter how many moments we had of challenges. I have said in a room where there is no such thing as failure for me, because I have made up my mind the day that I fail is the day that I pass away, and I've moved on. And then all of a sudden, you know, when I am facing God and he's going to tell me that those are all your failures that you have not succeeded in, then that's for me to face, and that's for me to go, I'm so sorry that I did not fulfill those pieces because of my fear or my doubt, or that I ran the other way, and when you told me to go forward, and so I ended up taking different routes, and I never got there. I don't want to be in that position. You don't want to be in that position. Why would you be putting yourself in the position? And in the same mindset, why would you continue being in the same position over and over and over without change? And so to me, pain versus suffering for defeat or glory, you know, that is something in your mind that you have to say, there, with glory there is pain. You know, I mean, no matter what it is, right? It's not as if you say to yourself, I must go through pain and able to have glory. Sometimes you're going to have glory days and it's just beautiful. You know, from the beginning to the time that you wake up, you're like, oh my goodness, this day couldn't even be any more perfect. And then it just gets better and better throughout the day. And you go home and you're ready for bed. And you're like, my goodness, I'm not ready for bed yet, because things are just so wonderful. Everything is just so great. I just want to submerge myself in this day and just feel it all and think of it as it's like the best day ever. And then guess what? You fall asleep and then another great day happens, you know, but it doesn't have to be like subsequently happening all the time where you wake up the next day and anticipate it. That next day may be the worst day of your life. And then all of a sudden you think to yourself, well, I'm glad I had a great day, because now this worst day will be something that I can overcome. And then I can strive for those great days over and over again. Because if you're honestly thinking to yourself that you're going to be getting great days every day, what happens on the day where Pleasantville just does not seem so pleasant? And then all of a sudden you just go into this gloom, this melancholy overtakes you. And that happens, it's real, you know, where you start to go, gosh, you know, oh, how come I'm just not feeling right now? You know, but at the same rate, it's not as if you're telling yourself, well, I must then suffer. And for no reason at all, I'm just going to make myself suffer. No, get up, do something about it, right? And really have that right attitude of saying, you know what, it's not great at this moment. As I've said in the very beginning of my articles, it's like, ask yourself before you even get up, are you at a 1, a 2, an 8, a 5, you know, a 10? Where are you? But that doesn't mean that as you are laying there that you've made up your mind that's where you're going to stay. Now, if you're at a 10, then that means it's maintenance to keep going, right? But if you're at a 5, then you say to yourself, okay, by the time I brush my teeth and I shower, I should be at about a 7, right? And by the time I'm up and moving and I get this part done, then I should be an 8. Think about your day proactively so that at the end of the day, you're not reacting, or as throughout the process of your day, you're not reactive all the time and asking yourself, you know, why am I suffering? Why am I suffering? Why am I suffering? You should have already known that. You should already know, so that you don't have to think about it as you continue on throughout your day, that you are just going through the grind in one, you know, cycle after another. And then when you get to that victorious moment, then you just know, okay, however many blood that I've sweat for this moment, however many muscles that ached, you know, however many parts of it all felt like pins and needles, guess what? I'm here. And that's all that will matter once you get there. And so preventing suffering for sacrifice, to me, you know, is that something that you say to yourself, I just won't make any sacrifices, so I won't have any suffering. That's another piece to think as well, is that in that case, I had someone tell me, you know, I told someone, you know, if you don't go and pursue your college degree now, you're going to look back many years later and it's going to be like that, where you go, I could have been finished today. And yet I had all those years where I just told myself, oh, so-and-so doesn't want me to, or so-and-so thinks I should do this, and all that wasted time. And that's a strong word. and that's a hurtful word that you would then have to accept, is you wasted time just doubting, just procrastinating, just hesitating, when you could have just got in there and kept going, no matter how many stumbles you would have had. And it may have even taken longer, so that it would ended up being 4 years instead of 3. Then all of a sudden you're like, I'm done, or I'm almost done, rather than saying, I'm still at 0. I'm still at no movement. I'm still at nothing pursued. And so you think about it from that perspective. In my article is like really talking about going, from high school to college, and just acknowledging that during the sacrifice, there's these challenges that you're going to run into, and it's okay. You just have to know that you may not know everything. Who does? And if you do, that's great. If you have people that are going to tell you, look, don't go that way, sometimes we still have that freedom and that liberty to go, well, I am going to go that way. And you're still going to find yourself going through a route that they had told you shouldn't have gone there, but that's for you to pursue, and that's for you to journey and then take it all in. But the ultimate piece is understanding that if I don't make that sacrifice just because I'm preventing any suffering, your greatest suffering is not having to venture that and not knowing what you could have become. That to me is like, wow, if there's this aching thing in me and it's telling me to pursue it. I have written like poetry from the time I can remember. I write, lyrics, music, and so forth from the time I can remember. And I know in my heart, I have been okay with that. I have sat down and I told my husband, there's going to be some songs I'm going to put out there and so forth. And I've tried, and then I just laugh. And I think I said, this is silly. I'm a mom, I'm a teacher, I'm a wife, and it's just not the time for me. And you know what? What's so beautiful about that is I've come to it where I go to my, I still remember this one lady who was in her, I want to say 50s or 60s, in the same class I was in when I was in college. I think it was perhaps maybe my junior or senior year in college. And she just was all smiles. That's going to be me. I just, went to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor said, how come you didn't pursue medical? I don't even know why he asked that, right? But I mean, for whatever reason, obviously he was just, I think it was the classes that we were talking about back in college. He's like, how come you didn't pursue becoming a doctor? So, and I go, well, there was a time when I was thinking about it, but it's not over. This is my calling right now. Being a teacher every day, I cannot tell you how many times have I looked at my students, and without them knowing, I say to myself, if I had not been here to believe in you, you would not have changed for the better. And that's my heart to believe. And I know that. It is not for me to sell, it's for me to believe, because I know it. I know that all the strain I had to go through this one child, or another one, sometimes a few, where you're looking at the student and you see them trying finally, and they're just, not only that, but they're believing, that they no longer have to work harder at where they think they get most attention doing something negative, but they're getting attention doing something positive, and me praising them. And I mean, I was working at praising it every time I caught it. Anytime I would praise. And then all of a sudden it just became such a norm for the student that it was like, now you're part of this team of just greatness, and that to me is that beautiful piece where you go, I've done that. I've truly done that. And so with my children, same thing. It's for me. I tell my own children, you're to do extraordinary things because you're an extraordinary child. And I've sold that to them from their very beginning. And that is something that when you tell yourself that, you give yourself no permission to do anything less than your best. And it doesn't matter what that arrives to, but it should be something that you forgo, and that the feeling of it, because then that's for you to ultimately own at the end, is knowing who you are and what you're putting yourself into. And so that suffering is going to be there, but that sacrifice, because that you're thinking in your mind you're going through to reach that victory, that's the ultimate. That is where you go, I am victorious, regardless of the suffering that I went through. I don't even look at it anymore. I just know I went through all that. I went through all the storms. I went through whatever. I didn't anticipate it. I just went through it. And here I am. So in the words of my mother, God bless us all. May we continue to inspire ourselves within, so then we have room to inspire those around us, all around us, and saying, if I can do it, you can too. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you next time.